Yo, we're gonna talk about who's been messing up everything. So Owen, Agatha All Along. We have to start with the beginning of the show. What did you think of the true crime intro?
I thought it was really cool. I liked how they had like the the names in there. I don't know. Did those names? Yeah, I sound like an idiot.
It had the names of the characters instead of the
Yes,
actual actors. Because
yes,
so it was kind of setting it up like WandaVision, where it was a show within a show.
yes.
Because at the end of WandaVision, Wanda tells Agatha she's going to trap her in her personality of the nosy neighbor.
Thank you
S
for helping me out there.
No problem. I'm here to save the day. That's why I wore the Superman shirt.
Very fitting.
Um, but yeah, the true crime intro. I'm glad you liked it because how I just spoke and it made sense. I did not have that answer in my head while watching the first episode of this show. So the show started, I'm watching it, and the true crime intro, and I'm literally sitting there like, what is going on? Like, this is not what I thought this show was going to be like. And then I watched more of the episode, and I'm like, oh, I'm just dumb. But yeah, so the true crime intro threw me off guard. I just hadn't had my coffee yet when I watched it, but yeah, I it now that I rewatched a couple of the beginning episodes, I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense now. Like
Don't
now I
don't
get it.
don't get me wrong. I didn't know what was going on either. I was very confused. Like I was
Owen's
like,
watching the
why is
show like,
she?
who
Why
is
is this bitch
Agatha? Like
why is this
what?
bitch a detective? Well, like what is going on?
Right. It's funny because like as soon as well, we'll get back to that. But so the show starts out with what I immediately was 100% intrigued by a murder. So it's I don't condone murder. But it starts with her solving a murder, and as soon as I saw the outfit, I went, oh, and then they moved her over and you see what the color of the hair is, and
Yeah,
I was like, oh,
yeah.
I see what we're doing here. So throughout the first episode, they do tease that she is trying to solve the murder of Wanda Maximoff, and in reality her trying to solve that murder is actually Aubrey Plaza's character of Rio attempting to get Agatha to remember how she had been put in the spell. And remember that she is in a spell, so she can become Agatha again instead of being Agnes. We get some nods to Agatha's son, a humongous one in the first episode where she walks into an empty bedroom with her son's name on it. So we learn like, oh, we might be learning about Agatha's son in this. So that's really the big first tease. And then while she is talking to Aubrey Plaza in her house, she hears a noise. She goes upstairs, and what do we see other than the main character from Heartstopper, Joe Locke himself, as how Agnes refers to him as Teen, and how Agatha continues to refer to him in this show as Teen and or Teenager. So we learn about, we think we're learning about Teen. He seems very quiet. Everything seems confusing. And it seems like his world and Agnes's is not fully lining up because he sees a painting and she sees a two-way mirror. So we kind of like WandaVision, we get the idea, or it's kind of given to us that something is not right. Not everything is what it seems. But really, that leads us into Agatha's transformation. So Agatha finds out I was put under this spell by the Scarlet Witch. I am actually Agatha, and she goes through her transformation where it takes us through every single one of the different neighbors that Catherine Hahn, as Agatha, played in WandaVision. So it took us through every single decade that she was before ultimately she turned back into the normal Agatha Harkness. But the butt naked version, which is surprising for a Marvel show, but here we are. And she won an award on Jennifer Hudson's show for being the first ever woman to show her butt in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So they
Did
gave
she
her a,
though?
they gave her a little fake trophy for it. Yeah.
I don't remember seeing like any full nudity or anything like
No,
that.
they showed her butt.
I don't remember
They didn't do like a close up on it. Don't get me wrong. Like
that.
they
That
weren't
would be weird.
they weren't gross about it, but like they did a wide shot and it's like her and it's but yeah, there's some butt action in there.
Okay.
But it's so she got the award for that. But Agatha, I missed her. I'm glad she's back. What do you think of pre every episode of this show? When you watched WandaVision, what was your overall feel about Agatha Harkness?
In WandaVision,
Yes.
I did not like her. I thought she was mean and manipulative, and she only wanted power. I did not like her at all.
All true statements. Not a thing you said was wrong about Agatha Harkness. I, you know me, I'm a fan of the baddies, and by that I mean the villains. I'm a huge fan of the villains, so Agatha was phenomenal to me, especially the song. Agatha All Along was definitely a staple in my apartment while that was happening. It was phenomenal. The who's been messing up everything. And the last line of the song proving how messed up she is by just saying, and I killed your dog Sparky too. And I was like, wow. She hard launch that Agatha killed the dog. So John Wick 3 started production right after that episode. But like for that show, she was phenomenal. I was excited to see her come back. Um, Now that we talked about Agatha, let's jump in. So we covered pretty much the entire first episode right
Wait, I
there.
got something to say.
Go for it.
So I don't I didn't think that she was a bad villain. I thought she was a great villain. Like
Yeah.
I
You just
like
didn't like her character because she was evil.
yes, correct. But so when she came into the show, I did not expect that. Like I didn't catch on to any of it until I saw it happen, and I thought that was a great twist. I think they did a really good job with her character in general.
So us comic book nerds caught on to it because of one reason, and it was the weirdest reason that we thought might not be accurate, but it was because in every single episode when like Wanda and Agatha they would change character, one thing stayed the same about Agatha's character, and it's that she wore a brooch. And like a very similar brooch was worn by Agatha Harkness in the comics. We only knew her as Agnes for half of the show. But seeing some of the ways that she acted in some of the episodes and the brooch pushed some of us to be like, maybe this is Agatha Harkness. Like we didn't hard launch that theory at first because we weren't 100% sure. But as time went on, we were more and more confident that this was Agatha Harkness. Especially when Agatha became one of the only characters, except for the Scarlet Witch, to actually break the fourth wall and talk to the camera crew in that episode when it was like modern day. And she's like, oh, haha, don't worry, kids, I don't bite. And then she looks right in the camera and she goes, I actually did bite a kid once. Yeah. And it's so we were like, oh, she has the ability to do that too. So that's where I got the biggest hint that something is wrong with this lady. Like she is not regular. She is like Wanda. She has to be magic. So now that we talked about Agatha, I wanted to move on and talk about the second most important character in this show, which is at least the second most important character until like 3, 4 episodes in. So, Teen. Let's talk about Teen, portrayed by Joe Locke. Most people know Joe Locke from, I don't know if you've seen this show or not, Netflix show known as Heartstopper. So it's a show based off of a graphic novel by Alice Osman. It's a graphic novel about a bi teenager and a gay teenager that end up being in a relationship. And in the TV show, one of them is played by Joe Locke, which he is phenomenal. The other, played by Nick Nelson, is portrayed by Kit Connor, which, if you don't know who that is, he portrayed young Elton John in Rocket Man. So he's no stranger to acting. And I watched that show, and I'll never forget going, I think that's young Reginald Dwight from Rocket Man. And it indeed was. But Joe Locke plays Charlie in that show, so he is one half of that couple. So, rising off of that stardom, he got cast in this show. What did you think of Teen?
I was really like confused with this character. Well, I actually not. I wasn't at all. That's a lie. Um, I knew he was gonna. I knew who he was gonna be right away. I just knew. Like, um, but I thought he did a really good job portraying the character. It was pretty good.
I felt really bad because a lot of my friends were messaging me after the reveal, which, let's just jump ahead right now. Spoiler alert, it's Billy Maximoff.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I didn't I didn't know that this was supposed to be a surprise. I guess that I follow one too many nerd news networks where I just knew that this was true, that he was going to be Billy Maximoff. So they were like, "Oh my gosh, it's Billy Maximoff." And all my friends were like, "Can you believe that reveal?" And I was like, I totally thought that we all knew this. Like I did not know this was supposed to be a surprise. I
Well,
just thought
that's why
I thought
they
we were waiting on the formality of it, really.
that's why they had the sigil on him, and why he was called Teen the whole time. So
I know, I guess I just didn't realize it. I was just like, no, we all know it. We're just waiting for the formal introduction of it. Um,
I would
which
say that wasn't really the twist of the show.
well, it was the first twist of the show.
Not the big one.
There are a couple twists.
There were,
But yeah, that's the
yeah.
first big twist of the show. So now, yeah, Billy Maximoff. We'll talk a little bit more about what he's doing in this show a little bit later. But let's move on to the other coven members, because in the episode we start recruiting the rest of Agatha's coven. So we move on to my main lady, Patty Lupone of Broadway fame, playing Lilia. What did you think of Lilia overall throughout this entire show?
Well, at first I just thought she was crazy. Like I thought she was whacked out of her mind, some shit like that. And then came to find out that she was just seeing points of her life throughout different her, how do I say this? She was seeing like the events of her life out of order. That was crazy.
So for
Overall,
me,
I think she was really
you might
really
agree
good.
with this point that I'm about to make because I know you've seen it. This to me, I was able to keep track of very well in a specific episode that we'll talk a little bit more about later. But it gave me the vibes of Dr. Manhattan, because
Oh,
Dr. Manhattan also similarly, famously, does not view time in a linear order. So he can experience most of his life at the same time. Obviously, Lilia is a little bit different because she cannot do that. she just kind of jumps back and forth between. She doesn't really have a lot of control over it, but she has to try to use what pieces she gets to ultimately lead her to her final goal. But I was able to keep track of it so well because I'm so used of having to keep track of Dr. Manhattan, especially in the movie and the show. I'm like, wait a minute, he's having like 4 conversations at once right now? Like, what do you mean he's talking to Ozymandias as well as his girlfriend? And this is 6 months apart from each other. But it was very, I don't know if you relate to that, but it was easier for me to keep track of that because of that experience in the past.
I did not make that connection at all. That's very interesting. And now that you say it, it makes total sense.
You're like, crap, now that he says it, like that, yeah. I immediately was like, oh, this is giving me like Dr. Manhattan vibes.
So I didn't realize that she was seeing time out of order. I thought she was just saying random things. Like I thought she was just a kook.
I did too. I didn't realize that she was seeing time out of order either. Until we got there, the one scene where I started to figure it out was where she said, which is crazy because this is very late in the show. She goes, "When she calls you a coward, duck."
Oh
And I
yeah,
was like, "Oh, she is seeing future events right now."
yeah.
But that was the part where I really understood, like, oh, we're time jumping right now. The other time where I started to get suspicious, but I went, maybe not, is when I think it's like the second episode when we're in the beachside mansion, um, and the dialogue that they wrote for the other characters reacting to Lilia's comments probably even funnier than Lilia's randomly placed like sentences herself. My favorite one being where she jumps out of it and she says, "Try to save Agatha." And Agatha goes, "I like that plan,
Yeah.
but like let's figure this out first." Which Catherine Hahn is just a comedic genius.
Hmm.
Her work as her work in Parks and Rec as Jennifer Barkley will forever be some of my favorite comedy. Poncho. But yeah, I adore her. So like yeah, Lilia's time jumping didn't make sense. But finally, we'll break into this episode because it mostly revolves around this coven member. Episode 7, Death's Hand in Mine, where we get a couple of big things in this episode. So we finally find out about Lilia's time jumping, and they show us what all of the messages that she was trying to give to the team while they were going through the witch's road. So ultimately, like, she was telling Alice, don't try to save Agatha. And she was trying to warn her before she died. Which, spoiler alert, Alice dies. We're going to get to her later, but she died. Lilia was trying to warn her. So we finally find out that all of her messages actually make sense now.
Hmm.
And I think the saddest one is the second episode where she goes, "I love you guys." That was her last message to the group before she ultimately passes away, which I was like crying in the club number one. But really quickly, I will just add in as my personal last point on Lilia. She ate that ballad up. So Patti LuPone is a phenomenal singer. She has started like many roles on Broadway. Some of her most famous collaborations were with Stephen Sondheim, rest in peace, um, who wrote many famous musicals like West Side Story, Sweeney Todd. She was in Company, The Regular, and The Revival, where they kind of rebooted some of the story. She was very famous for being in Anything Goes, playing the titular character. She's a phenomenal singer. If you've not heard her sing before, please go listen to her sing. She is phenomenal. I am a personal fan of her singing Ladies Who Lunch from Company, so look it up, Owen, because she is friggin' phenomenal. And you can just hear her in the back. Like every time I listen to that ballad, I can tell which one is her because she has a very recognizable singing voice, and she has a very recognizable voice in general. There's a guy on TikTok who does an impression of her, and I think it's spot on. And the way he sings, I'm like, this is 150% exactly what Patti LuPone sounds like. But if you're ever listening to the Ballad of the Witch's Road, and in the background you hear the character saying, "Down, down, down," that is Patti LuPone belting an entire song that no one else in the studio could have sang as good as she did. So, and I'm telling the truth on that one. That one's on God. As much as I love everyone else in the show, Patty had that ballot on lockdown, so the rest of you can sit down, take the paycheck, but she took the role. So she stayed ready. She didn't have to get ready, number one. She had that in the bag. And apparently she did that in one take. Joe Locke was like, she did that whole song in one take. And I live by myself. No one else lives in this house. Almost like The Office. I turned and I went, are we surprised? And like the cats are looking at me like, who is he talking to? Like what? And I'm like, I'm talking to myself. I just love Patti LuPone. But what was your favorite Lilia moment, or kind of what was your favorite character trait of Lilia throughout the show?
Hmm.
Other than the time jumping, which we pretty much already covered.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't really have a favorite moment with her. Besides the time jumping was cool. I just I don't know.
Gotcha. So sorry. I'm writing down block Owen on everything. Okay, sorry. Now that I made that side note real quick, we'll move on to the next important character in the show. I would argue one of the most important introductions that the show makes, possibly even more important than introducing Billy Maximoff. Rio, that we find out in episode 7, played by Aubrey Plaza, is Death. Long famous and forever famous quarter of Thanos and Deadpool. Has romantic relationships with both of them, kind of like a love triangle in the comics. So, hilariously, we find out in this that she has also had a romantic relationship with Agatha Harkness, or at least we find out some sort of relationship. We don't ever see a romantic side other than them kissing, which was interesting. I was like, oh, they kiss and then she died, which is famous. If you touch death, you die. So that made sense to me. But we knew that they had some sort of relationship, and we knew that Agatha didn't like her. So we find out why later, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But Death. What did you think of this reveal that Aubrey Plaza is playing this character that does a lot in the comics and like has a big role to play, especially in like Deadpool, Thanos stories, and just overall? Because Death is a real character. This is not someone totally made up. Death is a real thing. But in this characterization of her, how did you feel that Aubrey Plaza did as Death?
Um, like I need to go back. I just thought of something. I had a light bulb.
Go for it. You went Bing. Go
Yes,
for it.
I did. So I think that my favorite part with Lilia was when she saved the coven and went back into the room. That was a really good part. That was a really good scene.
I knew you had it in you. I was gonna say, there's no way you didn't have a favorite with Lilia. So okay, don't have to block. Okay, so we can go back.
Back to
Death.
Death.
Death. Yeah, give me your review of Death, other
I
than what?
I think she did a really good job, especially because I kind of had an intuition that she was going to be Death, but I didn't know how it was going to play out, and that wasn't until like maybe halfway through the series. I think the first 2 episodes, I was very confused with her character. I was like, "Who is this lady? What is she doing here?" Um, I thought it was interesting how she had a relationship with Agatha. That was very interesting. Um, She was a good character.
Some people feel weird talking about Death. I don't. So I will say that Death, number one, Aubrey Plaza, also of Parks and Rec fame, and a lot of other beautiful, hilarious roles. One of my favorite being in Scott Pilgrim. She's also very funny in that. But for this role, I thought that she was indeed menacing, and her chemistry with Catherine Hahn is phenomenal. Very, very good with that.
Hmm.
She's overall just very good at being menacing. She's just so good at it. I know that she's like a great person, but also she's just so good at it. I adore her. She's so funny. And I will say that I think the thing I appreciated the most, I would like to see more of it. If anything, I would like to see all of it. But when they showed her wearing the practical makeup finally for Death, where it was Aubrey Plaza, the whole costume, and then they covered almost like the full top, the bottom half of her face, and made it look like a skeleton, and it was practical. I'll put a picture right here for a couple of seconds because practical effects are something that I think are needed. I think everybody should use practical effects to some extent. And this show used it in a way that really enhanced the look of the character. Like, obviously, they most likely use CGI to enhance it maybe a little bit, especially when talking. But this makeup looked phenomenal. So the look of Death, I am 50% happy with it, and that's a good thing. The only way I would ever be 100% happy with it, let's get that full skull going on. I want full Grim Reaper from Billy and Mandy going on. I need the full skeleton. But
Can you explain what the difference between like what is practical? Is practical effects like the makeup? Like use makeup?
yes, so practical effects is like makeup. That's where you're putting on like prosthetics. They're putting stuff actually on you in your body. And then CGI is where you just put on a mocap suit and it's fully animated. It's done with a computer. It's not actually there.
Okay.
Yeah, she wore that makeup,
Okay.
and it was it very good in my opinion. Whoever made that makeup, you need a raise,
Yeah, I
because
didn't
it
even
was
know that it
phenomenal.
was makeup. I had no idea.
Yeah, fully makeup,
It's
and I
very
was very
very
happy.
cool.
I found that out, and I was like, and that's why it looked so good because it's when you only do CGI, it can look okay. When you do practical, but you use CGI to enhance it, bread and butter. You
Yeah.
hit the perfect combination right there. Everybody should use practical and just enhance it with CGI because it just looks a million times better.
Hmm.
Um,
It did. It was really good. Yeah.
it was phenomenal. So speaking of Death, we see her final showdown with Agatha, and we see that Agatha ultimately makes the sacrifice play in order to save Billy Maximoff. And Death does indeed honor her agreement. Usually, that is a main characterization of Death in a lot of characterizations throughout media, is that once Death makes a deal, Death does usually keep that deal. It might be tricky to get to that deal sometimes, or Death might try to cut some corners or rush the process, but Death is usually good about keeping their end of the bargain. So in this show, Death tells Agatha, if you give yourself to me, I'll leave that kid alone. And Agatha's like, no, I'll get you the kid. And then ultimately, Agatha sacrifices herself, and Death immediately turns around. She looks at Billy Maximoff. She says, you should get out of here. And then Billy leaves, goes back home, presumably to his family, who don't know that he has magical witch powers. So I'm very confused to see how they feel when they find that out. Like, oh, that's great. You can make a giant hex like your mom did. You should go to the insane asylum. But it was very interesting to see Death act like that because it's just, for a lot of the show they were menacing, and I think the most heartbreaking part of the show is the finale where we actually see Death, like Agatha is giving birth, and Death tells her like it's time, and Agatha's like, let me have time with my kid, and Death as is real life, Death was like, you're gonna get time with your kid, but eventually I'm gonna come for them, and I'm not gonna tell you when. It's gonna be a surprise, so you won't know, and it's gonna hurt. And Agatha was thankful that Death spared her son for that time, so and then she could at least have time with him as he grows up. And then eventually, while Agatha's sleeping, Death does indeed come for her son, and her son passes away. So from that point on, she hates Death. She hated Death from the beginning because she says, I hate you for this because you're going to kill my son. So we see that interaction. So that kind of shows us why Agatha hated Death when she showed up. And I think it's interesting because they plant that seed all the way back in the first episode when Agnes still thought she was a cop. And Aubrey Plaza's character walks in, she goes, ugh, and like immediately dreads the sight of her. And I was like, oh, that is powerful. Like, it is a hate that transcended the spell of the Scarlet Witch. It was so powerful, which not a lot of people can do that. Which we saw when the Scarlet Witch killed all of my favorite Marvel heroes in one fight. But it still not over that.
They'll be
Still
back.
love. Yes, still.
They'll be back.
Yeah, they'll one day. I still love you, Sam Raimi. You're still my idol. But after that final battle, we ultimately find out that I'm skipping some of the other characters for now because let's just focus on the big three. So we find out that Billy Maximoff might have gotten a characteristic from his mom after all, because we find out that unknown to him, Billy created the Witch's Road, and Agatha was lying the entire time. And she was just as surprised as everyone else when the door opened and the road was real. So we find out while looking around Billy's room that he was taking aspects from his room and from his experiences in life and putting them into the Witch's Road. So, what did you think of this reveal for the Witch's Road?
I'm not gonna lie to you. I was watching that and I was like, what does he mean? It was him. What was him? I'm an idiot. Like I kept what is, and then so once they started explaining Agatha's backstory and how she was taking her son on like around places and killing witches and giving them to death, and that was her agreement to keep her son. I understood that the road wasn't real and that like he created it. That's what made me understand. I thought the twist was amazing. I think that was the best twist in the show, the biggest twist in the show. That's to me what made the show. Like that was amazing. That was awesome. I can't hear you.
I totally forgot to unmute myself. I definitely agree. But my next question is a little bit on topic, a little bit off topic. So, what do you know about Billy and Tommy Maximoff?
You mean from the comics or
In general, from any medium, what do you know about these two siblings?
well, in the comics I knew that they died. I knew that Billy had the powers of Wanda and Tommy had the powers of Quicksilver. I knew that they like the spirits inherited other bodies or reincarnated into other bodies. Um, I knew they were part of the Young Avengers at some point. Um,
So yeah, there a lot. Yes, a lot of that is right on beat. The biggest part is that Billy Maximoff, also known as Wiccan, does indeed inherit his mother's powers for the Scarlet Witch, a lot of magic. And then Speed is the alter ego of Tommy Maximoff.
yes.
So when they inherit Maximoff's power or Quicksilver's, Yes, they do engage in hand speed. A crazy part of their background is that they are actually part of their history is that they actually are a part of Mephisto. So they spawned out of Mephisto and became Wanda's children. So technically, they played a part with Mephisto. And there was a period where Mephisto took them back, and that means they both died. And then we ultimately find out that Mephisto actually did not end up killing them. Their souls were still out there. So that's how it kind of plays into switching bodies, is that technically their souls were part of Mephisto. They died because he took their souls back, but their souls were out there. So we were like, Wanda was like, I'm coming for those kids. So Multiverse of Madness was not wrong because she was coming for those kids. Which obviously it's her children, so I completely understand.
Um,
Um,
I did know that, but I didn't. I wasn't gonna do a good job at explaining it, so I'm glad you did it for me.
you're good, no problem. So now that we finally talked about Billy and Tommy, I finally said the magic words of Tommy Maximoff. So we saw a lot of Billy in this show. And then the final words of this show are probably the most powerful to me. That's what got me the most hype about the future is the words, let's go find Tommy. So we know that in the future, we don't know when we will see them again yet. It hasn't been confirmed. Like, oh, they're going to be in Doctor Strange 4. Not sure yet. But we do indeed know that they will be searching for Billy. So we know that that search will happen, and pretty soon we will get Wiccan and Speed together again. Which the last time we saw them together was Multiverse of Madness, because that came out after WandaVision, where Wanda saw the last glimpse of her kids, before she ultimately, to our knowledge, passed away. Um, so, did I think they duped me pretty good on Agatha's plan. I truly thought that the Witch's Road was real, and I thought she had been down it before. Did you trust Agatha's plan throughout the show?
Hell no, I did not. Like I said, I thought she was evil, and from WandaVision going into the show, I totally did not. I thought she was up to something. I did not know what it was, but I thought she was up to something. And I am right there with you. I did not. I did not think that that was going to be the way it went down. Like I did not think that Billy created. Really, it wasn't Agatha all along. It was Billy all along in the show. And I
Yeah.
thought that was amazing. That was
They should have how Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the last episode they changed the title at the end to say Captain America and the
yeah,
Winter Soldier. They so should have done that with it was Billy all along.
yeah,
I'm like I that would have been hilarious.
yeah.
But so I will not lie. I thought that Agatha was being 100% honest in the second episode when she's like, yeah, we need to do the Witch's Road. I thought the Witch's Road was real and that she really had done it before. The only thing that I thought she was lying about is I did think that she was purposefully killing these witches along the way on the road.
That's what I thought
Um,
too.
so I
Yeah,
thought that she was purposefully killing them, and I thought that she was going to get her powers back in this show. I thought that, hey, when she went down the witch's road the first time, she killed all the other witches, and that's how she gained all of her power, is because
hmm
they all died. She got to reap all the reward.
me too.
So ultimately, I thought that was going to happen in this show, and then I found out that we were very, very wrong.
hmm
So that took me by surprise. I was definitely taken aback by that. So now that we kind of went through the whole show, who was your favorite Coven member?
Obviously, Billy. Come on, Billy Maximoff.
Okay, interesting choice.
Who was yours?
Mine was Lilia.
Okay,
I love Lilia.
that's fair.
I thought she was very funny, but also I thought that she was probably the best of the witches because yes, She did like, oh, the palm reading.
Well, as in
It's
like the purist.
yes.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Other than Eric's mom from that '70s show, she was the purest. She was truly the purest. But
she was.
my favorite is
R.I.P.
when they say, "So who's gonna go high?" And she went, "Oh, I don't do drugs." I'm like,
Oh my god.
okay, good joke, Marvel. Like you got me on that one. But yeah, I thought that she was the smartest, and I thought that she had the best plans. I was like, oh, her biggest weakness is that she always cuts out randomly and she goes somewhere else. And then we found out that that was actually her biggest pro. That was actually the best thing, is that she was able to kind of piece these together and ultimately formulate the plan that helps them survive in the end.
Yeah.
So I thought that was genius. A masterclass of writing in that episode. So Lilia was indeed my favorite, as well as her pipes running that ballad. But other than that, her story was good. I liked how she was the one who placed the sigil on the artifact and placed it into Billy's jacket, or sorry, William Kaplan's jacket. And I do like how if you place the sigil, you like don't remember that you did. So I like how she writes it, she puts it in his pocket, and then you see her kind of like leave and come back, and she goes, "Hey, some kid left this jacket in my booth." And I'm like, she didn't even know that she's like, I just cast a powerful spell to make that kid forget he's the son of the Scarlet Witch. And
the
it's
the
like, oh,
funny thing to me was that she I just thought she was going in and out, like she like, you know how she like moves through time. I thought she was just moving through time, and like, and that's why she forgot, until we find out that um I guess I should have known. I don't know why I thought that, to be honest.
I get it. I think that all of us were at that point, or at least all of us had that mentality at some point.
Hmm.
Um, I want to go back a little bit because I do want to explore how we felt about the different trials. So ultimately, um, they faced five trials. I'd like to say, because trial one was the seaside house, and that's where they encountered the poison. What did you think of that trial?
Um, hmm. Yeah, I'm blanking out.
You're good. So, I'll go first. We'll see if we jog your memory. So I that's where they give us the first clue that not a lot of us noticed, where Billy discovered the clue. So Billy sees it on the mantle. He goes to read the clue, and everything's on a timer. So that's where we find out that the wine they were drinking has been poisoned. In order to not die, they need one of the witches for a specialty they brought with them to make the cure. Once they make the cure, you can drink it and you will not die, you will live. As we see, not everybody got an equal dose of that cure because ultimately this is the trial where Kitty dies. I don't
Yeah,
say
she
her name
drank
in the
two
show.
glasses.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, she said
I had a
this
rough
is.
day.
She said this is bussin'. I'm having two glasses, and
She said,
she passed
today has
away.
been a really rough day.
Yeah, I'm having a second glass. Um, which is me after work most days.
That poor lady.
I know that poor. She
She
just
didn't
wanted to
even know what she
garden.
was walking
She
into.
just wanted to garden, and Agatha just had to bring her along. Um, Come on, you couldn't go grab anybody else that we don't care about, please.
Yeah, she already lost her
Um,
husband,
exactly. What the heck?
and
Messed up.
by a witch also.
Marvel's just ruining our life at this point. They're like, let's just make them miserable. Let's kill all of them. I mean, we all saw Infinity War at this point. But let's skip to trial number two now. So the recording booth exorcism is what I named this one because this is where they're in the recording booth. Alice's mother recorded the famous cover for Down the Witch's Road, where we find out that Alice's mom was trying to use her concerts to open the Witch's Road for herself. And we also get the second rendition of the ballad because we got the first one with the bell and the crazy Patti LuPone just killing all of the high notes song. And then this one is the more Agatha led. I would fight to say like a countryer, more country esque version of the song.
I thought this is where they were rocking out.
Rockin'. A
Yeah.
little bit near the
They had
end
the
of it, but it
drums. Oh
starts
no, no,
with
that
more
was
of a
later
country
on.
vibe.
That
It
was later.
starts with more of a country vibe, then it kind of transitions a little bit more into rock. In my
Was
opinion,
this
at
was
least.
this the one where Rio was on the drums or Death?
I don't think she was on the drums. I think Alice was on the drums. No, Alice was on the keys. I'm wrong. Death was on the drums. Alice was on the keys.
Yeah,
She was
I
on.
took that as like
She was on piano.
I thought that was more like rock.
I thought it started off with a softer vibe, which seemed more country to me, and then it did transition into rock in the end. But
And
also,
then like
I can see how it would mostly be a rock vibe.
this is the one with the curse where everything started going up in flames, correct?
Correct. This is the
Okay.
one where, yep, her curse showed up, and we see it's a demon, and it's scratching just about everybody in the studio.
Oh, I also just thought of this. Did you notice how Billy is the first one who discovered all of the clues, which I think was a very big indicator, which I didn't pick up on
Yes,
until I
I
watched
did not
it.
realize that. New rock stars pointed that out for me. That they said, notice how Billy discovered every clue, and I went, oh my god, he did. I leaned back and I was like, I noticed, but I didn't notice. Like I saw him do it, but I didn't piece two and two together. Like he's discovering all of them.
I didn't notice it until rewatching it.
Yeah,
But
it's definitely this show was brilliant in how it snuck stuff in, and then later on it told you, oh, you weren't paying attention, that was important, and I was like, leave me alone. Like there's a lot of stuff.
no,
You have
it's not.
37 movies and 7 shows. Leave me alone.
It's
I
not
have too
even.
much in my brain from Marvel.
It's not even that you're not paying attention. It's that it's very subtle clues that you wouldn't know.
Yeah,
That's why it's happening until you have seen the ending.
yeah.
Very well done.
Um, Trial number 3, where we get, I called it the Treehouse of Terror. So this is where Agatha's mother shows up. And this is also where we ultimately see Alice protect Agatha, and she passes away. What did you think of this sequence?
I was pissed. I was like, screw you, Agatha. You're a piece of shit.
Wow. So
I was mad.
Scathing review from
I was
Owen.
I was mad.
This scene, I'm not gonna lie, I was fooled at first. I was like, oh, Agatha was really just like, wow, she was heartbroken. And then she left the treehouse, and she was like, you're like your mother. And I'm like, oh, she did not care at all. But it was, that dialogue was hitting hard, man. Her mom was like, I should have killed you the moment you were born. I was like, if there was more of a phrase that my dad would say to me, I'm kidding. But it's just, yeah, I was like, wow, harsh. Like, that's crazy. And then the possession and like the demon crawling around and Agatha like appearing and then like disappearing. I was like, we are going like straight Conjuring / Annabelle vibes with this treehouse sequence. Like it went full on horror of like, oh yeah, we're just gonna turn off all the lights. Agatha's appearing and disappearing. Like freaking, we have a exorcism going on right now. There's a demon inside of Agatha, and it wants Agatha dead. And I'm like, oh my
I
gosh.
I have a question for you actually about this. Do you think that she was faking her possession like the whole time?
That's a good question. I personally don't think so. I think that Billy, so as we saw, Billy can control people. Because we saw that in order to dump Agatha on the ground, he controlled Lilia and Jen. So ultimately, I think that Billy didn't know he was controlling Agatha, but I think that he was doing it. Um, because also Agatha does say when they leave the treehouse, of course we don't pick up on it, or at least we don't fully recognize what it means until we find out that he made the road. But when she goes, ugh, of course that was so dramatic. You're just like your mother. And he's like, what do you mean by that? And she was saying, like, almost like an actor talking to a director, like, or vice versa, a director talking to an actor, like, oh, you pulled it off. Like, yes, the drama was there, everything. And Billy's like, yeah, that's because a terrible thing just happened. And Agatha's like, no, baby girl, we just lied to all those people. Like, we pulled off the biggest con of the century. What are you talking about? So I definitely think that he might have been controlling her, but she just went along for the ride.
The one thing I don't understand about that is how did he conjure up Agatha's mom without knowing what she looks like or anything about her?
So I think that's because we don't see Agatha's mom pop up until after Agatha's possessed. So I think that Billy, when he was controlling Agatha to act possessed, he got an image of her mother, and then that's where the image came from that he ultimately projects as a ghost. Is from him being in her mind, using those Scarlet Witch like powers, and seeing that image. Kind of how, like in Age of Ultron, when the Scarlet Witch goes in Tony's head and she's giving him visions of like a dead Captain America, Hulk is dead, Black Widow's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like that. So I think he was doing that, but with Agatha, and then ultimately he pulled a memory out of her and was able to use it. That's my
So
personal opinion.
that makes a lot of sense. So
And
do
if
you
that's
think
wrong, Kevin Feige is gonna send me a scathing email.
how do you think that how do you think that Agatha knew like immediately that it was Billy and not someone else? And do you think that Billy knew
Because
or she
she is the moment. She knows every. Agatha has been around the block.
well she's been
Agatha
around since forever like so long,
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
hundreds of
Agatha
years.
was around the block before they built the block. Like
Yeah.
she was there. Agatha built the block. It
So
legitimately was Agatha all along.
she
And
probably knew that he was the Scarlet Witch's son the whole time.
I think that she could sense his power just like she sensed the Scarlet Witch's. So
Yeah.
I because she says like, I got an energy reading that there was a strong magic. She's like, and then I
Yeah.
show up to this hex and you're here. And so I think that just like the Scarlet Witch, after she became Agatha again, she's like, I'm sensing magic from this kid. Like,
Yeah.
he's got it. There's something there.
Hmm.
So I think that ultimately she read him like a book after she became Agatha. Because Agatha's, everyone's like, oh, she's like just this heinous witch who's been killing people for centuries. I'm like, yeah, but when you're alive for that long, you learn stuff and like you
Yeah.
begin to see the signs. And she says in the show like, oh, it was so easy to tell because you're so much like your mother. Like you're just like her. You act like her. Your emotions control your reaction to the environment. And I think it does say in the show that the biggest hint that she got that it was Billy was when he created the road. Because she says, kid, I knew you were Billy when you created the road. I knew the witch's road wasn't real. I made it up hundreds of years ago to
Yeah.
steal power from other witches. She's
Yeah.
like, so as soon as we started this journey, I knew something was going on. That's why she was nervous, and every single trial they went into, we thought she was nervous because she knew what they were in for. In reality, they were actually nervous because Agatha had no idea what was going on because this was not supposed to be a real thing.
Right.
So I think that that's why she was so nervous the whole time. And ultimately, that's when she starts like, I think this kid, there's more going on
Hmm.
because this road is not supposed to be real. Um, but now that we got,
Wait, I have one more question for you
go for it.
about that sequence actually. The one we were talking about in the third trial. So what was the point of Agatha killing Alice then? Because I just thought it was like
No, because she got her power.
she didn't get to she couldn't use it though.
Yeah, she could.
She didn't. She went. Nothing happened.
No, because she still had that power. Because remember, the road doesn't actually give you a reward because the road's not real.
Right. They went back in. They went a circle.
Yeah, so she stole Alice's power.
Okay. Hmm.
Because think about it, like Agatha crawled back out of the ground. The other two fell below it. So Agatha was definitely using her magic.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I just don't. I don't understand why she would do that because it seemed
Because
like
she's hungry for power.
she's evil. But then in the end of the show, we find out she's not evil. But is that a change that
No,
happens at the end of
well,
the
we find
show?
out that she's not fully evil. She still killed a lot of people and she still did horrible things, but we find out she has a soft spot for Billy because she was telling the truth in the beginning of the show when she's like, with all this talk of being good people, you're reminding me of my son. That's how he was too. Because before he died, he was like, "Mom, do we have to keep killing people? I don't want to kill other witches anymore." And she was like, "Oh, he was a good kid." And um, but yeah, so it's one of those things where I think that she is still bad to a certain extent. She just has a soft spot for Billy because number one, she doesn't want to fully die yet because she doesn't want to have to face her son after all the bad things she did because she thinks that she knows pretty much that her son would be disappointed because he didn't want to kill witches anymore. And the fact that Billy, she kind of sees herself as she views him in a similar light that she viewed her son, which is he's a good person and she tells him oh yeah, you killed people. You definitely killed some of these people in here, but oh well, every witch does. You're gonna be like me one day, and he rejects that. But I still think she's bad. She just kind of has a soft spot for Billy Maximoff.
So I took it in a way at the end of the show that she killed people because she had to, or because she faced some kind of trauma. Like, and it showed that the witches in the Salem Seven, were gonna kill her, and that's why she took their power originally. Is what I thought.
Maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. That's how I took it. I thought that she had good in her, and that she was only this way because people made her this way. And also as a defense mechanism to she didn't want people to know what actually happened. She rather them think the bad things about her. Well, she said that I think she'd rather people think bad things about her than explain what really happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at the end of the show, I changed my mind about her a lot.
Yeah, I get it. Now that we kind of covered the whole show, there's one last cameo kind of two cameos that I want to talk about before I reach my final question. So the final last two cameos, we do get to see um, William Kaplan's boyfriend, or really Billy Maximoff's boyfriend, because he was Billy at that point. So we don't hear from them after this episode, so we don't know what's going on. But yeah, Billy Maximoff is talking to his boyfriend, and he wants his boyfriend to drive him to meet none other than Ralph Boner himself at the Boner family reunion. And the shirt slogan says, "Let's pitch a tent," which is probably the funniest joke that Marvel has ever put on a t-shirt, other than in No Way Home when Doctor Strange's mug said, "Oh, for fuck's sake." That's probably I'm loving these puns that they come up with. But we meet Ralph Boner once again, who's traumatized from being controlled by Agatha, and he talks about how yes, Wanda did bad things, but how Agatha was the truly evil one. So what did you think of this cameo of seeing Ralph Boner again?
This was one of my favorite parts of the show. I love Evan Peters. I love Evan Peters. He's fucking phenomenal. And I thought it was hilarious the way they did that. And as soon as they were going out to meet up with someone and it was someone from the Hex, I was like, it's gonna be him. It's gonna be him. And I
I
was so
never
excited
thought
to
in a
see.
million years that I would ever hear anyone say I was really excited to see Ralph Boner in this Marvel show.
Dude, the first
Because
time, well,
I
when I
don't know if
first,
you remember in WandaVision
I do.
when it was revealed that he wasn't Quicksilver and
Oh,
that
I
he
was
was
pissed.
Ralph Boner, an actor, everyone lost their minds.
Yeah, I
And
was
like
pissed.
you would think that Disney was about to lose ownership of Marvel over how angry these people
I
were.
was mad. I was
And
mad.
then
Yes.
now this show comes around, and Owen, the same person who was mad in WandaVision, is now like, I was excited to see Ralph Boner make a return.
Because it was funny.
That's
It
the
was
writing
funny.
of Kevin Feige, ladies and
Yes, it
gentlemen.
was very well done, and it was hilarious the way they did it. And his
Yeah.
character was just so funny. Like
I do
he
love how
sprayed him
at the
off with
end of
the.
him being traumatized and just trauma dumping the entire time, he goes, also, you guys should come to my one man show. And he's just like, he's plugging himself before he leaves. Like, hey, you should come see my show downtown.
When he
And
first
they're
meets
like,
them,
no.
he sprays them off with a bunch of shit, and he's like being extra cautious,
I likes
like
when
witch
when he
repellent.
lifts up Joe Locke's shirt and he's like, "You wearing a wire?" And he like looks at
It's
his
like,
like he
no.
looks at his torso and he goes to grab the other guy's shirt and the other guy just lifts it up himself and he goes, "Don't touch me, no, I'm not wearing a wire." And I'm like, fair. I'm not a fan of people touching me, so I totally understand. But yeah, I just wanted to bring up those cameos because those were two of my favorites.
Yes.
Also, famously knowing that Billy Maximoff has a boyfriend, I was like, well, and apparently it was rumor that they were talking about making his boyfriend Hulkling. Because in the comics, that
He
is who
is.
Billy Maximoff he
Yeah.
dates Hulkling. So there is a rumor that they were planning on making him Hulkling, but ultimately that did not happen. So we don't know if this actor will continue on and then become Hulkling, or if they're going to hire someone else and have them be Hulkling. We do not know yet, but we know that they are looking for someone to play Hulkling. So we will find out eventually. But now, crazy enough, it's to the final question I have for you. Where do you think that we are going to see these characters again? We left this show with only four characters being alive. So we have Agatha. Well, actually, Agatha is technically dead, but she's a ghost. So I'm going to count her still because we can still see her. Agatha, Billy, and then we also have Jen. So those are the main three. I'm gonna leave Death. I'll include Death. She's the fourth one. So we have Death, Jen, Billy, and Agatha. When do you think we're gonna see these characters again?
Billy and Agatha, I would say, well, for sure, Billy, I would say possibly a Young Avengers movie or show. That would be really cool. I'd be down for that. Secret Wars, maybe. I don't know. Jen, I don't know. I never really put much thought into Jen coming back.
Well, also you have to remember, as of now, Jen still thinks that the Witch's Road is real
Oh, I did not think
because
about
in her experience, it all actually happened. She wasn't with the group when Billy realized he had
that.
made it
Yeah,
himself. So Jen thinks that it is a genuine thing that is real. I will
possibly.
say that
Well,
personally, I think that we will see Billy Maximoff and possibly Agatha. They are both magic-based characters, so I personally believe that we are most likely going to see them in the next Doctor Strange.
no,
Um,
probably.
because also I think that Doctor Strange is going to be like, yeah, I'm going to keep an eye on you because I had to keep an eye on your mother and she tried to kill me and like a 17-year-old girl, so I'm going to keep an eye on you because I don't want you to have the same homicidal tendencies as your mother, because that was crazy and she read the Darkhold, so don't do that. But now all
But
the
you can't do that.
Darkholds are gone because
They
she
can't.
destroyed them, so he can't. But I ultimately think we're going to see the return of the Darkhold. I don't think it's that hot of a take to think that it's going to come back.
How could it come
But
back though?
it's Marvel, Owen. How does anything happen?
Yeah, good point.
How is Agatha a ghost when we've never seen ghosts other than in their ethereal form in Doctor Strange.
She is in an ethereal form.
Is she?
I believe so.
When did they say that?
Oh, they didn't say that. I just saw it in a
Exactly.
video. I
We
saw it in a
never
video.
know.
That's why I
We
thought that.
never know.
So, I was gonna say I've also heard rumors of there possibly being a Scarlet Witch movie in the future, which I would also be down for. That'd be cool.
I will cry and throw up right now. I hope that is true. I love
I
the Scarlet
well,
Witch, and she was hot take. She was phenomenal in the Multiverse of Madness.
oh, she
She has
was.
killed every time she was on screen.
Yeah.
I do love all the jokes about her accent magically disappearing. Hilarious.
It
But
did. It did in
yeah,
WandaVision
it
too.
did. It's true. And I think it's funny how they like Marvel has a funny thing they'll do sometimes where if they make a goof or if something happens that doesn't line up continuity wise, they'll just bring it up again later on and they'll make fun of it. And I'm like, yes, that's how you should handle continuity errors. It's just bring it up again and be like, oh yeah, we were wrong. And I'm like, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's personally where I think we'll see some of these characters again.
Um, I was also gonna say um, I don't know why I'm blanking on her name right now. Elizabeth Olsen. She was in an interview and she said that she would love for her character to get her own movie. And
I would
that's
also love for her character to get her own movie.
yeah, yeah, it would be amazing. I don't know if they're actually gonna do that, but that would be where I want to see these characters the most. Again, especially because in the comics, I know Agatha like showed Wanda how to use her powers, and now it seems like she's gonna do that for Billy, which is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah,
Bef-
it's a good
before we
kind
end
of
too,
legacy thing.
before we end too, I wanted to say I think that my favorite scene in the show was Billy and Billy's final showdown with Death with Agatha. I thought that was a really cool like kind of fight scene because they didn't have any like that in the show with magic and stuff. I thought that was really cool. And I was going to ask you also what your favorite scene in the entire show was.
My favorite scene is when Lilia flips the tower. I That was a heart-wrenching moment and I thought that that episode built up to it perfectly with
Yeah,
like, with all the tarot cards and them getting it wrong twice before Lilia finally figures out I'm not playing this game for anyone else. I'm playing for me. And
yeah,
then she starts laying it out. None of the swords are falling. She keeps going. And then she takes the tower card, flips it, kills all of the others, and then ultimately herself as well. I thought that was a brilliant way to play it.
yeah.
And cannot highly commend her enough. Ladies and gentlemen, Patty Lupone is phenomenal. So yeah, she was brilliant in this show, and I wish that we would get to see more of her because ugh, she just made this show so good, and her acting and her honestly, I'm saying episode 7 was her episode. It was the best one in the series. As good as the finale was, as good as episode like 8 was, episode 7, her episode, was the peak of this show.
That's your opinion.
It's it's the easiest opinion I've ever thought of in my entire life.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah,
Yeah,
that's my personal take on Agatha All Along. I love this show. Episode 7 is a must watch for people who want to see how writing should be done.
yeah. And for me, it was tough because I still didn't understand what was going on. And for me, my favorite part of the show, or any show like that, is like where everything is kind of put together. And that's why I like the episode that I like the most. But that is a fair point, and I do agree that it's a really great episode.
Okay. That's well, we just successfully finished talking about Agatha All Along.
Yeah.
So, do you have any final comments to make about this show before we head on out?
Should we rate it?
Yeah, we can rate it. Go for it. What do you rate this show?
I want to say it's hard because I think WandaVision was one of my favorite Disney Plus shows. I think it was my favorite Disney Plus show, and I don't think I can rate it higher than what I rated that. I want to say like 8.5, 8.5 out of 10. I don't know.
Okay. I'll give it 8 witches' brooms out of 10.
Which is
My
pretty.
personal one. 8 witches' brooms out of 10. Very good show. Marvel is learning because they've had some flops and they're learning now. I thought it was very interesting because She-Hulk was obviously like everyone went crazy over it when it came out in the bad way, and then this show is almost the inverse of that. And it's because I think this show did something that She-Hulk kind of stayed away from. They had a darker tone, but they kept the comedy up, which is Marvel in general. Like everyone is getting murdered in Marvel, and Marvel heroes are murdering their villains. Don't get it wrong. Like we've only seen a couple of villains survive fights in this cinematic universe. They are a happy gang of murderers who are murdering all the time, and um, they kept that darker tone, but it was also lighthearted, and the dialogue was phenomenal. So it was a very nice balancing act. Meanwhile, She-Hulk seemed like a 100% comedy. So I think that Marvel is starting to find that balance. Which don't get me wrong, this is my hottest take. I'm one of the people who enjoyed She-Hulk.
Oh, I
Um,
enjoyed it as well.
I thought it was a good time. Granted, my favorite genre is comedy, so as soon as you get me
There,
to laugh, I'm down for the show. But yeah, I think that Marvel is learning that balance, and I think that with this show, they are one step closer to cracking the code of keeping their continuity or keeping the consistency between their shows just right where they all can come out and be as successful as possible.
I really hope so because not She-Hulk. She-Hulk was it had its ups and downs. Secret Invasion, that shit was bad. I did
I have
not like
opted
that.
to never talk bad about that show because I know for a fact that Samuel Jackson could kick my ass.
Oh, but he
So
was the only good part of the entire show. Like he didn't do anything
he was
wrong.
phenomenal. Yeah, no, he
Yeah,
didn't do anything
it
wrong.
wasn't
But
on him.
also, I don't
The
want to talk
writing,
bad about his show because he will kick my ass, and I don't want that.
the writing was not good, and it had like I said, nothing to do with Samuel Jackson. He's phenomenal, but that show was not good. It was worse.
Ben
Worse.
Mendelsohn also phenomenal.
Yes.
Dermot Mulroney, I was very happy to see him as the president of the United States. You know, I met Dermot Mulroney. I'm a big Scream fan, so I have his autograph on my Ghostface mask. So
Also,
when he showed up in that show, I was like, oh, I'm very happy to see Dermot in this show.
also Amelia Clark. She did a good job, but I
She
mean,
was good.
still, I don't know. Rhodey is a scroll. Are you kidding me?
Okay, well, on that note, you brought up my silver bullet. Um, Josh's mood is changing, so that means we got to wrap it up. Bipolar's kicking in. But other than that, yeah, that was Agatha All Along. Overall, good show. I would highly recommend that people go watch it.
Me too.
I think that it's a phenomenal show, and especially if you want to see a masterclass in writing, episode 7 all the way. Go watch episode 7. You will understand why I have talked so highly about it almost this entire episode. But yeah, other than that, this was we're just two normal nerds who like the color purple and witches who sing. Yeah, that's really the best way to put it in my opinion. But yeah, other than that, peace out nerds and we'll see you next time.